Hi, everybody. My name is O.Hossack. I'm an agriculture education instructor and FFA advisor here at Sequoyah. I just hope everybody out there is doing good. We thank you for taking some time out of your day to tune in and learn a couple things. Today, we're going to talk about something that is essential for life. And so if you think of if we just think of things, or what is life dependent on? Most people would say water, oxygen, the sun, and those things are all correct, but there's often one thing that is overlooked, and that is the soil, right? We use it to grow plants that we're going to consume. We build things on it. We do a whole bunch of things that are dependent on the soil, but we usually don't think about it as being something that is critical to our everyday lives. Soil can be defined as organic and inorganic materials on the surface of the earth that provide a medium for plant growth. And so we're going to talk about just some real basic soil science type stuff today. We're going to go through kind of the composition, some of the how it's formed, and then at the very end we're going to do some different experiments that you can actually do at home to determine your soil type, and you'll figure out what all that means hopefully by the end of our time here today. So soil is formed by 6 different factors, right? And depending on how those factors interact with each other will determine the different type of soil. And so you may be thinking to yourself, well, why does that matter, right? Soil is soil. That is actually not true, and we'll get to that here in a second. But certain plants require different types of soil to be able to grow to their fullest extent. Certain soils are needed for construction or for waste filtration, so like in the bottom of a landfill, right? Those types of things. So depending on what our purpose is, will determine kind of what soil is ideal for that. Okay. Out of those different soil formation factors, okay, parent material, climate, topography, or the slope or layout of the land, living organisms, and time are all of the different factors. Time being the biggest one, right? So on average, and this can be different from place to place depending on where you live on the globe, but about 25 years is required to form a single centimeter of soil. And so if you think about, right, you go out to your garden and you take a shovel in and you take up 6 inches of soil, right? That takes hundreds, if not thousands of years to form just that small layer. And so time is really one of the biggest factors when it comes to soil formation. When we talk about parent material, we're talking about the large pieces of bedrock or large sheets of rock that are broken down, weathered into really, really small pieces. And that's all part of the soil. That's all it is just rock that's broken down to really, really small pieces. So in this area, we have a lot of limestone. And so a lot of if you were to look at those little soil particles, you could trace their lineage back to large sheets of limestone that are all around our area, especially the closer you get to the Verdigris River, and if you go up Keatonville Hill on top of up there, a lot of limestone. That's actually why that area is called Limestone. Back in the day, it used to be a town, but that was like before probably anybody watching was even born. Moving on, so climate and weathering. So how much rain, how much wind, how much erosion happens to that parent material will determine some of the speed that soil is formed at. Okay, topography, so the slope or elevation. So if we have a rock on the side of Mount Everest, okay, any erosion that happens, where are those little pieces going to go? Well, they're going to fall off the side and down into the valley below, right? Because it's really, really steep. Whereas if we have a really flat plain, right, and so if there's flooding and erosion that's happening there, most of that material is going to stay in that general vicinity. Okay, so the slope and elevation of where we're at is also going to affect our soil formation. Something that's often overlooked is going to be living organisms, so plants, insects, microbes, and large animals. So we have little microscopic organisms that are breaking down organic material within the soil. And that will add certain components to it that we'll talk about here in a second. As insects and large animals, microbes, and all those things die, right, they're going to decompose and they are going to form part of the soil, right? And that's what's going to add nutrients and other things to it. And again, that last factor is going to be time. Soil just takes time. So if we have all of these different things to one extent or another in places like deserts, right? But we also have all of these factors in places like a rainforest or a deciduous forest in the eastern United States. The problem is the time, right? So we may not have enough time for these things to break down and to form soil in a place like a desert before they're blown away someplace else. Whereas if we have a valley in a forest, right, we have a lot of time where all these materials are undisturbed, and soil can actually form in those circumstances. Okay, so there's 4 different components to any given soil. If you go outside of your house, you look at it, you're going to find these 4 things. Okay, the biggest percentage, about 45% of any given soil, and I think it's important to also point out that these are averages, right? So you may have a soil that is a little bit higher in one area and lower in another, but on average, about 45% is going to be that mineral component. That's going to be that broken down bedrock and other minerals that will be floating around in the ground. Okay, 25% of soil is going to be air. You're like, well, how does that? That doesn't make any sense, right? Soil is something, right, we can hold, and when we look at it, we don't see the air. If you think about if we had like a mason jar full of marbles, right? In between those different marbles are going to be open spaces, and that's where air and also water can inhabit. So while you can't necessarily see it by looking at it, it's still going to be part of the mixture. Okay, water can be another 25%, and you'll notice we have kind of these squiggly lines right here in our pie chart, and the reason for that is that these two components can fluctuate the most, right? So depending on if we just had a huge rainstorm like we had a couple of days ago, right, the water content of our soil might be a lot higher than our air content. So all of those open spaces or pores are going to be filled with water, and as that water trickles down the profile or evaporates out of the soil, right, our air component, that percentage might increase. Probably the most important, but also the smallest of the different components is going to be organic matter. And that's going to be about 5% of the total composition of the soil. And so what that's going to be composed of is decayed material, whether that's animals, leaves, microbial activity, all those kinds of things. As they expire and fall and decompose, they get added into this mixture. Okay, and this is really important because this is where our things, our nutrients are going to be located. All of those essential things that plants need to be able to grow and develop are going to be found within that organic matter. This particular example is at 5%. If you go to some place like the Corn Belt in the Midwest, that organic matter percentage might be 6 to 7%. As the soil breaks down, as more things decompose into the soil, right, that percentage will go higher. Places like the Corn Belt, this eastern side of Oklahoma where we've had really lush, dense grassland for hundreds of thousands of years, as those plants decay, as animals decay, right, they all get added into the soil. So if you look at a soil that has a lot, it's really black, and that black layer is really deep, right, that's going to be higher in organic matter than if you have, just like play sand in a sandbox, right? So those are the 4 different components. Depending on environmental conditions, will determine the different percentages of each of those. Okay, so as that parent material breaks down and as that organic matter breaks down, it gets smaller and smaller the longer that weathering occurs. Okay, and so we classify soil particles, okay, into 3 different sizes. So we have sand, we have silt, and we have clay. Sand is going to be the largest, silt is going to be in the middle, and clay is going to be the smallest particle size. So if you take just pure sand, I'm sure you guys have maybe done this, whether you go to, maybe you're floating the river or you go to a beach, maybe not a beach in Oklahoma because they're all man-made, but that's different topic, different time. But and you take a handful of sand and you feel it, right? It feels gritty. It's almost like you can feel the individual pieces. The good thing about that is that if we go back to our 4 components, right? It's going to be high in that air percentage. Okay, there's going to be a lot of space in between those particles of sand, and that is going to allow water to trickle very quickly through that soil profile. This can be good if we don't want, if we need a place to drain quickly, like maybe around a structure, or if we have a low spot and we need that water not to sit, we need it to drain and return back to the groundwater. Having a real sandy soil would be ideal. Our silt layer, if you had just pure silt, it almost feel like baby powder. And it's going to hold water and nutrients well. So a lot of the things that plants need are going to attach to those silt particle sizes, and they're still going to be accessible to plant roots and nutrient uptake, those kinds of things. Okay, the smallest is going to be clay, and I'm sure maybe if you've taken an art class or if you've ever gone to one of those places where they give you an apron and you paint and you put it in the thing and then you get it when you're done. What is the name? You know what I'm talking about. But anyways, digress. And so it's going to feel hard and real compact whenever it is dry. And when it gets wet, it's almost going to feel sticky, like those little silly hands that you can throw and hit your siblings with. And it sticks to them, and then you get yelled at by your mom. Just not speaking from experience or anything, but that clay, those really, really small particles are going to hold water tighter than these other 2 particle sizes. And because of that, sometimes that water may not actually, those chemical bonds, those bonds may not be able to be broken, and that water may not even be available to a plant. And so you may have plants wilting due to lack of water uptake, right? But there still might be water in the soil. It's not going to be completely dry. It's just being held so tightly by those clay particles that it is not available to the plants. Okay. So this is what we call a soil triangle. And if you notice, we have sand, silt, and clay on each side going in different directions, and we have all these colors and numbers and things. It can look real confusing, but it's actually a very helpful tool to determine what type of soil that you have. And so there is 12 different soil types. So whether you are in Paris, France, or you're in Claremore, Oklahoma, or in, I guess, I don't know, those are pretty far apart, I guess, right? Or somewhere in the Middle East, right? You're going to have one of these different types of soil, right? So whether it is heavy clay, 100% sand, 100% silt, or somewhere in the middle, you're going to fall into one of these different categories, okay? These numbers on the side represent the different percentages of each of these different particle sizes. And so how this works is you basically kind of draw imaginary lines with your finger. This one's great because it's colorful and the lines are easy to see, at least on my end. There's some you could Google that might have more lines on them that you can kind of get down into exact percentages. But there's actually a good one, New South Wales in Australia. They have a really good soil, like they have a lot of resources for people to learn about soil, and they have a really good soil triangle. You can Google it, and that's another chasing a squirrel there. But so how this works is you're going to take your percentage of 2 of these, trace the lines wherever they meet. That's what type of soil you have. So if we have something that is, let's say, 30% sand, okay, and 40% silt, if we follow those lines right where they meet, okay, we're going to be at clay loam. Excuse me. We're going to be at clay loam. So that would be our soil type based upon those percentages of the other two. And you can kind of check your work by, if you take these two, right, where they meet, and then you go over to the third side, all three of those numbers should equal 100%, right? Because it's a percentage. So if you end up with like 80 or something, then you did it wrong. Okay. As you look on here, you might see the word LOAM. It's not the band that put out Party Rock. It's a soil definition. But anyways, what loam means is that it is a relatively even mixture of all three of those, give or take 0 to 25 percentage points. So if we are at clay loam, right, to use the example we just did, we were 30, 40, right, and 30. So we're roughly the same percentages of each individual particle size. Okay. So to give another example, if we have a soil that is 20% clay and 15% sand, right? Well, you can say, oh, well, there's not a 15 on here. So we can just kind of guess right here in between 10 and 20. Okay, we're going to follow our lines down, and we'll be right there in sandy, in the sandy loam. And so if you see sandy, or if you see silt or clay in front of loam, then that usually means that that particular soil is going to be higher in the clay particle size, or it's going to have a lot more clay or silt or sand than maybe some of the others might. Okay, so there's two different ways to be able to test at home what type of soil you have. There is soil ribboning that hopefully we have time to get to because I was rambling a little bit, but there's also a real easy method that you can use, and all you need is a bucket of soil and a jar, right? So you're basically, you'd be like Jack Sparrow, you can have a jar of dirt. Sorry for the movie references there. So all you're going to do is you're going to fill it up about halfway full of water, okay? You're going to try not to make a mess with whatever it is you're doing. And you want to try to get a bunch of soil that is free of roots and small rocks and debris, leaves, those sorts of things. And what you're going to do is you're going to put that into the jar without trying to make a huge mess on Miss Helbig's table here. But no promises. So just put your lid on tight, but if at home, if you have some borax, which is basically like a detergent booster, you can take a specially custom designed spoon that you stole from Mr. Harshfield's room that has a nice little bend in it, and you can take about half of a spoonful of the borax. You can put that in there, and what that's going to help basically those particles fall out of the water faster. And that is exactly what we are looking at with the setup. And so once all the soil and water and the borax is in there, you're going to shake it for about 5 to 7 to 10 to however long you want to do this till you get bored and stop. This is a great thing if you have like a little brother or sister. You can be like, here, shake this for 10 minutes. And so what will happen is, as that soil breaks apart and mixes with the water, the heavier pieces are going to fall out first. And so you may think, well, how do I know which piece is going to be heavier or more dense, right? Well, if we think back to our sand, silt, and clay, sand was the biggest, so it's going to fall out first, followed then by your silt and then your clay. Your sand is going to fall out within the first minute and a half to 2 minutes, your silt 30 to 45 minutes, and then after a couple of days, you're going to have a thin layer of clay form on the jar. Chris, can you see that very well, or should I bring it closer to the camera? And so about right there. Is that good? Okay. And so what will happen is we have these distinct layers that will form. So this top real kind of tan layer, that's going to be our clay. Okay. from that line down to where the texture kind of changes again, that's going to be our silt, and then our sand is going to be on the bottom. And so what we can do is we can take a little ruler, okay, and we can measure our total height, and then we can measure the height of each individual component, or particle size rather, and then we can make a rough estimation of the type of soil that we have. Okay, and so I took the measurements on that. We had 150 millimeters of sand, 370 of silt, and we had 60 milliliters of clay. And so that ends up being about 25% sand, 65% silt, and a 11% clay. And I used some rounding. We actually ended up with like 99 point something. Math, it's tough. Especially for an ag teacher. Anyways, so now if we go to our soil triangle after we looked one of these up on the internet, okay, we are going to be 25% sand, so that's going to be right here between 20 and 30, and then we're going to be 65% silt. So if we take those, right, and we follow those lines, we're going to be right here at a clay loam. And so that makes sense. I live kind of on a flat spot in between kind of two rivers that has 100-year flooding all the time, so it makes sense that we have more silt washed up there and sand and those types of things. So at the O.Hossack Hacienda, we have a clay loam soil, right? And so what I would encourage you guys to do is do this at home and just kind of see what type of soil you have. My guess is, I don't know if I should say this or not, but most of you guys are probably going to be in this general vicinity. If you are maybe more north and west of town, you might be kind of somewhere over here. But for the most part, you're going to be in that region. Okay. Now, granted, this isn't exact. If we wanted to be more scientific, right, we could get graduated cylinders and distilled water and do all these more specific methods of calculating our percentages. But for at home, if you don't have a jar, have spaghetti one night, save the pasta sauce, right? That'll work about perfect. Okay. But that's so the other way is called soil ribboning. Okay. And how that works, this is a little more messy, so it might be a little more fun. So I'm going to take another soil sample. Again, I'm going to try to get as free of rocks, roots, leaves, small mammals, whatever it might be. I'm just going to take a little handful of soil, okay, and I'm going to take our handy dandy spray bottle. I'm just going to kind of wet it down gradually. Okay, I'm going to work it back and forth just like if I was making a bread dough. Okay, and as this happens, I can start to feel little rocks and things, and I'm going to push those out. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of add some water, and basically I want it to not drop it back in the bucket. That's what I don't want to do. Okay, I'm going to work it until I have a ball that feels kind of sticky, but it's not dripping wet, free of that material, which is harder than you think. Okay, and I'm going to take it between my pointer finger and my thumb, and I'm just going to kind of depress, okay, real light, and push forward. And so what you'll end up with is a little piece of soil that is kind of stuck together, and my soil is actually a little bit dry. Okay, so I'm going to add just a little bit more water. If you try to do this and you're adding water and it's just falling apart and it's not forming a ball, then you probably have a handful of sand, which should be apparent whenever you picked it up. Yeah, it should feel just like sand. And so as I push this ribbon forward, okay, a piece is going to fall off. Okay, I can then take my handy dandy ruler again, and I can see, okay, we're at about 3 centimeters or 30 millimeters, or we're at about, for your standard measurement, you're going to be at about an inch. We should have switched to the metric system, but that's neither here nor there. That's just like a sciencey thing. But anyways, we can then take that ribbon, that soil ribbon, and we can compare it to some different charts you can find online. And depending on the length of that, will determine our sand, silt, and clay percentage. It's not as precise because there's a lot of factors. Do you have extra water? Do you have did you push with the right firmness? Are you doing your part? So there's some room for human error, but you can do that in the field. All you need is a little bit of water, and just go out, grab you some soil, and make you a ball. Okay, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, sudden emotional outbursts, feel free to, you can send me an email, owen.Hossack@sequoiaeagles.net. Thank you for your time. Hope everybody out there is staying safe and not losing their mind by sitting at home like I have. So anyways, so they're going to be you're going to be in your loam to silty clay loam to silt loam. So they're going to be real. It's going to be a pretty even mixture. The main difference is they're going to be high in organic matter, right? Which is what makes it so fertile, which is why they can grow crops so efficiently as opposed to other places. Okay, thank you.